Hey, it's Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Monday. It's April 22nd. This will be our chart lesson for today. And typical after long holiday uh, break, this is kind of the price action. Actually, this wasn't really a horrible day considering. I mean, I've seen some days where it comes in after a holiday and it just kind of goes sideways like that, like this range right here. So something else to think about. There's several different ways to look at today. We had this little trend down. We had a break. We moved. We tried to move to a new low, and then we just kind of bounced. And when by the time 9 o'clock arrives and your overnight high and your overnight lows here, and you haven't traded outside of that, you got to consider it's probably going to be a range day, and that's what we end up with here today. We traded solely within the highs and lows of the day. It was uphill for the most part. There's an upward bias here. It was from really right after the open. It's been up the whole day, and we're still trading up. A couple of different ways to see this. There is the bigger two-tiered lighter channel here, and really you could have played that most of the day. That's what I was looking at. There is a darker two-tiered channel that is a little flatter here. It's in play as well. It didn't really come back into play till after 2 o'clock, so you really were better off to stick to the steeper two-tiered channel and then the flat range right here. You can see this. Let's just make this a different color for just so it's easier to see. This looks a little busy with all the different lines on here, but they're all important. And really the more slanted one just didn't come. You didn't need it till right in here, and then it really was too late. I did mark this trade, as you can see. It's right off of the more slanted, darker channel. It's right off of the range low as well. It's a second entry long. It's right at 2 o'clock. I went ahead and marked it. Normally I'll tell you not to enter trades that late, but right there at 2 o'clock, if you get a good setup like that, you're probably okay to take it. So I wouldn't enter anything much after about 15, a quarter after or so. And that's Central Standard Time I'm sure I'll get that question. I get it a lot. Somebody will come in new and they'll say, what time frame? But we're talking about Central Standard Time. I am on Central Standard Time. So whenever I talk about times, I'm talking about Central Time, and you'll have to do the math yourself. So based on where you're at. Uh, so anyway, one thing of interest, I always talk about how you get a good idea if your lines are in the right place, prices gap over them. And notice this gap right here. I missed this earlier. Somebody asked me about it, and I thought he was talking about this right here. And somehow I missed that. And I'm like, well, I had a single gap, but there's like multiple. There's like 3 to 4 ticks right there in that gap. And you don't see that very often. In fact, I don't know if I've ever seen a gap on the ES during regular trading hours that big. So it's hard to say what happened. Maybe it's because it's coming in from the holiday and the volume is just still a little light, and who knows what happens. But anyway, back to my original point here is that a lot of times you'll know your lines are in the right place because for whatever reason prices will gap over them. And notice how we gapped over that line right there. There's your first one. And then if you look at this midline, we gapped over it here. We gapped over it here. When I say gapped over it, the bars do not overlap. And if you can see, this is maybe hard to see right here, but it's probably on your chart too. But there's no overlap. This bar closes on its very high, and the next one opens on its very low, and it doesn't back up. And notice how most of your bars all overlap somewhat. In other words, they don't. At some point, they have some part of their bars that overlap, and not overlapping leaves a gap between the two bars, and those gaps are like any other gaps. They don't last very long. Prices try to fill those gaps. So like right here, this one closed on its high and then opened on its very low and started trading, but it did back up and overlap before it completely closed up here at the very high. That's what generally will happen. You had the same thing happen right here. This one closed on its very high, opened on the next bar and traded up, but it traded down and it overlapped quite a few ticks there. But if you come up here, this one doesn't do that. The gap stays. This one, the gap remains. It even came back another bar and tried to fill the gap and couldn't, and went higher. It didn't fill the gap until it came back down on this bar. Um, Same thing right here. It couldn't fill the gap until it came back on this bar. And notice how all of them are right at those lines. They're important lines. This one is a midline coming here. We gapped over it once, twice. I don't know if there's any more in here or not. Right here, it ended up backing up and filling that one, but notice how it gapped it again. It closed on its high, opened on its low, and traded up, but then it backed down and overlapped a little bit before it went higher. But if it doesn't back up and overlap, then you end up with a little gap. Even if it's only one tick, there's a gap in there. So why we had such a big gap here, a couple of people asked me about it. I'm not sure. And the only thing I can say is, hey, it's probably because of the long weekend, and there just weren't a lot of trades in there. The market was a little thin early on, maybe. Um, Otherwise, I don't know. Here's another little gap right here. Notice how it gapped over right there, and it didn't fill it till it came back on this bar. And there tend to be a lot of them today. And again, that leads me to believe that it's probably just because of a lot of people closed out their trades before the long Easter holiday and the long weekend, and the volume was just a little thin this morning. So generally you don't see a lot of this kind of thing right here on the ES. It just rarely happens. So anyway, let's talk about the trades. There's not many of them today. It won't take very long. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe a green one or two in there. So not many trades. Just kind of slow and methodical, kind of a typical after holiday hangover type trading day, where it's just not a lot going on, not a lot of volume. But really from the regular session opening around 8:30 here, we traded up all day. There's a lot of sideways stuff, and you can trade this both ways. Although generally, if the bias is upwards, you want to kind of stick to that. And of course, before I forget, there's your first leg up. And once you started going higher from there, you would look for a measured leg up. And you can see we're getting close to that. We're right at 315 and closing now. So we didn't quite get there. We missed it by a few ticks. If you put this all the way up at the high, you can see it came across right. Just a few ticks. So we're a few ticks short of having another measured move up. But that would have given you a nice target. If you played that and kind of hung on for the day, it would have kept you in the trades all day. Or at least I shouldn't say all day, but it would have kept you in the trade looking to reach that target. So let's talk about the trades. You had to be very patient this morning because 7 o'clock came right in here. There's no entry to the short side, and then we're just going sideways here, and there's no entry in either direction. If anything, you might look for something back to the EMA, and you finally get a nice strong bar, but then you're going long right into the highs here. And that's not a good thing. I like this best here, but it probably fits pretty well right there too, and you still get the closer too. So you just don't have room to get out before the high, and you don't have much room to the EMA either. Yes, it took off, but it's still not a good setup. The next 10 times you try to enter this, it might fail on you. Probably will fail. So that's what really is hard for some people to deal with, is to see a setup like that and then talk themselves out of it because they're following the rules, and then it take off like that. But trust me, if you followed the rules, which say you can't enter here because you're entering into all that resistance, you did the right thing. Notice too that we did have a little failed break lower, so that might be enough to drive it on through, but you don't know that it's going to give you a scalper's profit, and you may get stuck in this thing only to see it go lower. So you just really can't enter that trade. And yeah, it goes on. It turns out to be a nice move. But if you didn't take it, you did the right thing. So just keep that in mind. And don't beat yourself up over it. You did the right thing. And then, of course, we come over here, make a high, and then you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry long. And this is a little bit of a little congestion area right here. And notice how we broke a little lower than the previous bars before you made that second entry long. So you're probably going to trap some people. It is a little bit away from the EMA, but this is a strong move up. So you're probably going to push up and make a new high. And so for that reason, I like that one. It's real close to being green, but um, I'm probably going to take that one. You're a little bit away from the EMA and so forth, but that is a nice move up, and you're going to get another attempt to test that high. It's a little close to the high as well, so again, for those reasons, it's really close to being green. I went ahead and marked it blue, but it could swing either way. So, you know, if you're leaning towards the green, you're not wrong. So, a lot of times people will ask me that, you know, their chart might be a little bit different, or they'll look at the trade a little bit different, and so, you know, I'll try to tell it how I see it and save you from having to send me an email. But yeah, there's some reasons to not like that one being blue. It's real close. It could swing either way. And of course, we run up, and we're a long way away from the EMA, but you really need a lower high, and that doesn't come to down here. And now you're going sideways, got 3 or 4 bars stacked up. That looks like a good short, but if you take it, you get burned. And that's why you just can't enter out of that stuff, because a lot of times it will fail like that and burn you. Because all you need to do is get a close outside this little trend line and then make a new low, and then you've met your criteria. But also there's the hope that maybe if you draw this line, I think earlier I had it drawn a little steeper when I first had it. I think I drew it across here and put it up, but it went right through there, and so I drew it again and just reevaluated it when we got a little more price action here, and you can see it fits much better here. And then you get the break. It tries to make a new low, but really you get a failure here on a failed second entry short. Notice you got this first entry. There's really a failure right here, but that's 2 legs up and a second entry short coming down here on a little bigger picture. But more than anything, it confirms that trend line working up. If you drew it off these first 2 swings, it bounces here. I like that one. That's your first really good setup there. You make a higher low right here, which you could consider, but you don't know for sure that this, I mean, it looks like there's a midline there, but it hadn't really been confirmed on the upper side yet. Again, it looks like it probably fits, but you really need a little more proof of that than take that higher low right there, especially right into a little 2-bar matching high. And of course it turns down and you get a leg down, a little bit of correction. It never breaks higher than a second leg, and it bounces right off that trend line. And that's really 2 legs back. I like going long there, another bullish bar. It is the first, you do have this trend line coming down, and it is the first close outside. So you got to consider that. But another thing I like is you made that low, and then you've got a quick double test. Plus you drop that one little tick more down. It looks like it's going to come back and stop us out before it's any good, before it reaches a scalper's profit, but it doesn't. It bounces and goes on up. So, but now it's pretty obvious we're in this sideways stuff. So, you got a second entry short here, but the trend has still been up, and we're still making kind of higher highs. We made a double bottom and then a higher high there. So there's a good chance that we may go higher. But when it makes this double test, when it made this high, these 2 are a double test of this high, and you got another bearish bar. I like going short there now. Just to ride it back to here, and you can notice it makes another little test of that and gives you a second entry long. Notice that's a double top. So first entry, second entry, relatively small bar. This double test this level here. Lots of reasons to like that one. It's real low risk anyway because it's only 3 ticks, and we're coming right off the lows, so you'll probably head back here to a minimum. Notice prices found some resistance there, but we did push on through before it was over. And that was it for today. I mean, there's just not much more there. And I mean, that's not totally surprising. Notice where we're at. We're still right around the 2,900. Here's that 2,900 level. And here's something else to consider. Here's where we closed last trading day. This is where we opened down here today, so that leaves a gap, a big gap, and you would expect prices to try to fill it. Notice once we filled it to the tick, we just kind of went sideways for a while before we finally pushed above it, and then look how it's acting as resistance or support. It was acting as resistance across here, and then now it's acting as support, which is what you want to see before you go long. And notice there's a nice little second entry long, new high, first entry, second entry. If it was still during trading hours, that'd be a good second entry long right there. So just not a lot happening today. Kind of a quiet after holiday, long weekend trading day. It's pretty typical. But study this chart, study those little gaps I pointed out to you and how they look and how it tends to fit with your trend lines and your trend support lines and your mid lines and so forth. And notice how you'll see prices gap over them at those places, at those key entries. So, and that tends to tell you if you got it in the right place. I'm pretty sure this line's in the right place right here, this midline, because we gapped once, twice. Where was it? Somewhere else. We gapped right there. It came back and filled it. Seemed like there was another one somewhere. But anyway, I think you get the point. Not much else we can say about today. So I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. Hope you had a good trading day. I hope you had a good weekend. Hope you enjoyed the extra day, the long weekend. We're done for now, though. We'll be back tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.